Okay, so in this video, what I'm showing is spin forces. The basic conclusion that I've come to after many years, at least 20 years of thinking about things, reading, studying, philosophy, spirituality, psychic experiences, you name it. What I've come to, this kind of point that I've come to, is the recognition that everything in nature is a spin force. It's not merely that everything in nature is due to spin forces, that for something to be at all, there must be some spin force that is holding it in place or bringing it into its condition, or if not a direct spin force, then a counter spin force, or either spin forces and or counter spin forces that are bringing things into being or maintaining them in their condition. So what I have here is essentially kind of like I guess it's not exactly a map per se, but it's just kind of like a depiction of a sense of these spin forces, kind of one spin force spinning into the other. So you have this largest kind of spin force around the outside, which is, I'm calling the ether spin force, and then you have this spin force within it, this second spin force, which is the magnetic spin force, and then it alternates back again, and that's the electrical spin force, and then you have this alternating again. So you have these spin forces. That's the photon spin force. Then you have the plasma, gas, liquid, solid. So basically what you have is all of these spin forces are always flowing one into the other. So actually in the ultimate kind of analysis, everything in nature potentially is different frequencies of this fundamental substance that, for lack of a better term, I'm calling ether, or everything in nature is given that all the spin forces and spin frequencies are just different forms of spun ether. So ether as being the fundamental universal substance that is the basis of all substance and spin forces that would presumably be filling all spaces. Okay, so what I've also done is just put these little spin force kind of patterns, just to kind of illustrate the principle a little bit better. But what this is about spin force calculations. And what that means is that there's one question that comes with this drawing, or this theory, or this principle, this theory of spin forces, as that spin is the fundamental principle of everything, and thus spin forces are what defines and describes everything. So the question is, what are the equations that describe the spin forces for each of these substances? So even if you don't agree that there's an ether, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter if you agree there's an ether or not. Here what I've done is I've drawn lines out with a question mark from and called these are the formula, and lines over here with question marks, equations, spin force equations. So basically, whether you agree that there's an ether or not, or that whether there's spiritual awareness or any of these things, doesn't matter. Spin force still governs everything. Spin governs everything. So in order to understand nature and reality, we have to map out each of these. At the bottom, the smallest one is the solid spin force, then liquid, then gaseous, plasma, photon, electrical, magnetic, and then ether spin force. But what we need to do is actually what mathematicians need to do and physicists need to do, which I am not, they need to figure out what the mathematical formula of each of these spin forces are, or even you could say the range of these spin forces. What are, what is the mathematics, the geometry, the spin force geometry, the calculations for each of these distinct spin forces, or what are the spin force calculations for each of these. So when you look at solids have, there's some sort of spin force calculation that governs everything that we see with solids. There's some kind of spin force calculations that can define and describe accurately everything that happens with fluids, with liquids. There's some kind of spin force calculation that can define and describe everything that happens, all phenomena we can observe with gases. There are spin force calculations that can describe everything, all forms of plasma. There are spin force calculations likewise that can describe all of everything to do with light, with photons, everything to do with electricity and electrons, everything to do with magnetism and magnetic forces. And if there is, a fundamental etheric or ether kind of spin force underlying all these other spin forces, then we should be able to formulate a spin force calculation that accurately describes that force as well. And when we do this, then we have actually a correct and complete and accurate and map or model or template of physics. See, if we look at physics as ever being a linear forces, we'll never figure out reality or physics. If we start from the assumption that all forces are spin forces, and we start calculating these spin forces accurately and precisely, we can actually get this theory of everything mapped out and get all the equations and formula together to where we won't have any more questions about how reality works. It's spin, and so we need to calculate the spin forces. Once we do that, we can make the whole range of spin technologies that are above and beyond anything we've created technologically at this point. So it's very important, and I hope it's clear, and I hope that makes sense. Thanks.